The WBC president, Mauricio Schulman, has come out and said that Conor McGregor is one win away from fighting for a world championship in boxing. And this was met by tremendous pushback by the boxing community, right? Most of us want to give a damn either way. The competitive architecture and the honesty and the legitimacy within a boxing championship is questionable at best. But within the boxing community, that's a very real thing. They've learned to work in with the confines of the ridiculousness, and they've put their lives on hold, many of them, to try to pursue a dream. Got to be sensitive as well as respectful to that fact, and the community pushed back on Schulman tremendously. And I will just tell you, let's take a little bit closer look at that. Before you think that boxing is dirty for having said that, I'm not sure we wouldn't say that with an MMA. We would show a tremendous respect to any combat athlete who then came over to MMA, even if it was to make their debut. If they were a multiple-time, by example, jiu-jitsu champion, or use Jordan Burroughs, who was just on Joe Rogan's podcast, a multiple-time world and Olympic champion was to come over to MMA, there is certain matches that if they had, and yes, just one, that you could see where they would be going right in for a championship, right? I mean, there is plenty of matches that if Jordan Burroughs, I'll use him by as example, I think you guys are familiar, he just did Joe Rogan, is why I think you guys might be familiar. Total stud, dominated his field, not only the best of his time, by many they believe to be the best of all time. If he was to come over into MMA, he would have a meaningful match right out of the gate. They are not going to use him and undercard him. He could be in Bellator, UFC, any organization, any way you want to do it. He's going to be put into a feature match, which means he's going to have a pretty tough opponent. He's not going to walk in against the number 2 or 3 guy, but he's going to walk in with a meaningful opponent. And if he had a certain performance, that could catapult him right into a title shot. Absolutely. I realize the example that I just gave you has never happened, but it would. If we brought over some certain stuff, I mean, use Clarissa Shields by example. She had never done MMA, and they were talking about her coming over right in and stepping in against Amanda. And the story would be pretty easy to tell. 1, she meets the weight limit. 2, she's a fantastic competitor. And 3, the competitiveness in her, where she won 2 Olympic gold medals, happened to be in a form of combat known as boxing, which makes for a very interesting, intriguing matchup against Amanda, who has ran through everybody else. So even though that didn't happen, I think that we would be accepting of what Schulman is stating had it happened here. And he's using a mythical scenario too. He's not saying, hey, Conor, just come over and take on anybody. He realizes that if Conor comes over and has a boxing match, it's going to be against a meaningful opponent, because Conor's only going to do it for a meaningful payday, which can only happen with a meaningful opponent. He's not saying come over, fight one of the Paul brothers, and as long as you get a W, I'll throw you in there with Canelo. It's not what he's saying at all. I realize he did not use very many words. You have to read into what he's saying, but he's taking realisticness, using objectiveness, and saying, Conor, if he had another fight, it's going to be meaningful. I mean, the names thrown at him are Canelo, are Manny Pacquiao. It's going to be a big fight. It's going to be a rematch with Floyd. It's going to be a big and meaningful fight that is likely to absolutely never happen. But if it did, which is what he spoke to, and he got a win, sure, he could draw right into the top guy. I don't hate that idea as much as many. And I do hate the rewriting of the story of Conor versus Floyd. I have never personally witnessed a sports story more mistold than that one. It pains people to admit that Conor, who had 0 experience, went a half an hour with the best that industry ever had. It pains them. It pains them to the point that to pull Conor down, whatever it takes to pull Conor down, they were willing to burn Floyd, the greatest talent that their industry had ever seen, who capped it off at a perfect 50-0 with the win over the Irishman. They were so adamant to not give Conor his due for what he did that they were willing to say Floyd was old, Floyd was done. Floyd stopped training after that fight, popped into Japan against the sitting world kickboxing champion, knocked him down and got him out of there all in 90 seconds after not training. a year plus after the match with McGregor, where Floyd was said to be rusty and old and over the hill, he got called out by Canelo. He got called out by De La Hoya. He got called out by Pacquiao, guys who, all of which you respect, all of which, if they were to fight, Floyd would go off as the betting favorite. So it was insincere, is my point. When people in the boxing community tried to pull Floyd down, when all they wanted to do was diminish Conor, when they were doing that, they weren't willing to bet that way. Floyd would have gone off as the favorite. They would say one thing, but if they had to part with their money, they would have put it on Mayweather. So once we've now established that Floyd was none of the things of old, tired, once we establish that, we're then left with the only reality that is left, which is Conor did a damn good job. Turns out Conor's really good at boxing. Just how far can he go? So I don't know that the premise really speaks to the poor state of affairs for boxing. Boxing is in a poor state of affairs, but it always has been. That's not new. Anybody that comes out with this revelation that boxing doesn't know what they're doing and the competitive architecture is terrible and the champions that they list are unproven, unchallenged, and unworthy, that just makes you a new boxing fan. It's been that way forever. They are going to pick two people that they think can draw more than flies and put them at the top of the bill for the cheesiest belt in all of sports. I have seen Little League trophies that cost more money than the WBA, WBC, IBF World Championship belt. It is on a piece of pleather. It's not even leather. The metal on there is nothing more than that. It is not gold. It is not silver. It is not titanium. It is not precious in the least. Those belts with markup so that the guy that made them gets to make a profit. Those belts cost $314, and I can tell you the exact website to go to get them. I only offer that to you because you're make-believing that this world championship means if it meant something, it wouldn't have a $300 belt. Retail value. I mean, I'm just trying to make this point. Yes, if you think that boxing is corrupt and in a sad state, you're right, but it's not new. It's terrible. There's a reason the NCAA doesn't recognize it. There's a reason there's no high school in the lands that does it. There's a reason there's no junior high. There's a reason you can't get a college scholarship on any level to do it. Yes, it's a really crappy sport. You either enjoy watching it or you don't, but the leadership is awful. Sure, Conor McGregor one fight away. Sure, according to Sonnen, where he's wrong is if Conor wants to walk in right now, Canelo will put that strap up. If Conor wants to walk in right now, Anthony Joshua will put the belt up. Any weight class, any way you want to do it. Conor is not one win away. Conor is one signature away from fighting for the title.